The flowering leaves of all these life-giving trees that flow in the breeze, giving us the air to breathe, came from the seeds that sons and daughters had sown, passing down histories through stories, genes, and bones. Hear the whispers of the past, dictate your prologue, a generational griot through which memories are prolonged. Till we reach down like nourishing waters to seek truths, except we receive nourishment when we're digging the roots.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, June 20th. I'm your host, Nika Smith, and we are here for the 35th episode of BlackProGen Live. We are so glad that you could take time this evening to join us for an amazing conversation regarding people of color in social organizations. But before we get started into the content for the evening, just want to go over a few housekeeping issues. Actually, not even issues, just things, right? All right, if you're watching the show live, we love to hear from you. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can tweet us at BlackProGen. You can also hashtag your comments on Twitter with BlackProGen. If you're watching live on YouTube, there is a live chat taking place. And in that live chat, you'll see a number of different people there commenting, giving their feedback as the show happens. That live chat, if you're watching on a computer, is to the top right-hand corner of your screen. And if you're using the YouTube app, the live chat is at the bottom of the screen. And we'll be able to see and hear from viewers all night long. So please feel free to let us know where you're coming from, say hello, give a shout out to the panelists for the evening, and participate in the conversation. As I mentioned just a bit ago, tonight's topic is Rites of Life, Religious and Fraternal and Benevolent Societies. People of color communities thrive on social and community interaction. Tonight, you'll learn about the history of religious, fraternal, and benevolent groups and how they can add to your already existing genealogy and family history research. And we have quite a bit to talk about tonight. This is a very, very full topic. Also, before we get started with introductions, don't forget to subscribe to The Lowdown by BlackProGen. Get the latest and greatest from BlackProGen in your inbox. Subscribe to The Lowdown today. How do you do it? Check the description of the recording of this and any BlackProGen Live episode for the link to subscribe to The Lowdown. It includes our blogs, podcasts, anything that we produce as a group. All of our joined content comes together in one feed and gets sent to you directly to your inbox. So don't forget to subscribe to The Lowdown today. Also, don't forget to check out the other 34 episodes of BlackProGen Live. Be sure to check out the playlist following the show, as you'll be able to get your fill of genealogy and family history research and related tips and tricks. And before we get into introductions for the panel tonight, I just want to do a extended bio for our esteemed guest who will be joining us, who is our Genia Bud, Jari. And Jari C. Henri, because I do Louisiana research, so I know that's how you pronounce his surname, is Henri. I see him giggling. Is a New Orleans native, proud Louisiana Creole with roots dating back more than 2 centuries along the Bayou Lafourche and the German Acadian coast. He is a graduate of Tulane University and teaches high school social studies. He is a member of the Louisiana Historical Society, Creole Gen, and the Genealogical Research Society of New Orleans. He is presented at a number of historical and genealogical conferences. He serves as a national lay board member for the Knights of Peter Claver and is a Knight of Columbus. He is writing what will be the first comprehensive history of the KPC. He does genealogical research professionally and has performed genealogy research for Finding Your Roots and the Georgetown Memory Project. So that is our guest for the evening, is Jari Henri. I might have to talk to him after this because that surname shows up in my genealogy results. But before we get into the content of the evening, hi, everybody. Look, I'm back at home. Hey, what's going on? All right, panelists, unmute yourselves. We got to do introductions. So Jari got a nice, beautiful introduction. We read through his bio. Just want to let him wave hello and say what's up to the people out there watching tonight.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad to join you all.
Oh, I love. Oh yes, give me all that, all that. I just want to hear you talk all night because yes, I love your accent already.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with let's see, Ellen.
Hey, everybody. I'm here in Tampa, and hopefully read my blog, Latino Genealogy, blogspot.com.
All right, next up is Bernice Alexander Bennett.
Hello, everyone. Bernice Bennett from Maryland and Blog Talk Radio.
All right, next up, we've got James Morgan.
Hello, everybody. James Morgan coming to you from hot and muggy Mount Rainier, Maryland, right outside the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. I want to apologize to everybody because I missed the last, I think, 2 episodes, but I was really busy past few weeks, but I'm back and refreshed and rejuvenated.
We were going to kick you out. Me and True had a whole discussion. We said it was over for James. Like, his welcome has been worn. We're done with him.
You know what? I can understand that. I can understand that completely.
Yeah, because you just totally ditched us. Last but not least,
I'm sorry I had a date. I'm sorry.
I know, it's like how dare he try to date his bae, right?
Yeah.
Like, how dare he do that? Like, how dare you take her out? Like, seriously?
Sorry.
All right, last but not least, white glasses with the orange heading, Miss True Lewis.
Hey, everyone. I'm here at Fort Knox, Kentucky. It's blistering hot today, and I'm glad to be here and to see you all out in the chat room and on Twitter. And you can find me at My True Roots or mytrueroots.com. Stop on over.
Stop on over as Ellen drinks her tea. I don't even have my mug. I should have got my tea mug. She's like, tea. I'm Nika Smith, resident troublemaker, blogger, YouTuber. Now, I guess you would say that. Whoisnikasmith.com. We've got our awesome chatters. Our faithful are here in the chat room, like Denise Muhammad. Shout out to her. She's here every single week. We've got Wanda Looney, who's joining us. Melissa Barker, the archive lady, is in the house. Trisha Blount, who is our Ask Mariah guest for this evening. She is also there as well. Shannon Christmas, our Genia Bud. We've got Ayati, Gerard Miller, Tyrone Craft. Thank you so much, you all, for joining us. And tonight's topic is one that, of course, is close to home. Of course, I have to give an obligatory shout out. There's no coincidence why I'm wearing pink and green this evening. Right, soror, Bernice Bennett. Gotta throw the book up too. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. AKA all day. All day. All right now. All right now. But that's not, I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about, right? We're talking about social organizations, community service organizations that began with a purpose, right? Maybe you want to get together to do community service. Maybe you need to help widows or other folks who cannot afford to take care of their families after the breadwinner of the family dies. There's a skiwi from Khalifa in the chat room. Just wanted to put that out there as well. Yes, I see you, soror. But tonight, that's what we're going to talk about is social organizations. How do you add them? How do you learn how to research them and add them to your already existing genealogy research, and how they can add breadth to your genealogy file, database, book, whatever project that you're working on. So that's why Jari is here. That's why James is here. James and Jari are our Genia Buds, resident experts in this area. Of course, the panel at large can chime in because we have a ton of resources for this evening. So let's jump right in. No top 10. Let's go. So here's the first question. Here's the first question. Why is organizational research important when it comes to genealogy?
Jar, you want to take that?
Sure. Genealogy, organizational research is so important because it helps us to put some of the meat on the bones of the ancestral research that we're doing. The other sources that we consult regularly, census records, vital records, sacramental records, and the like, they help us to get names, dates, and to locate our ancestors in particular places at particular times. But as Nika said, And affiliations such as AKA, for example, can lead us to all sorts of wonderful clues about our ancestors' lives, about their educational backgrounds, for one, their occupations, their religious, their church affiliations, all sorts of wonderful things. And I think that for us, we have to go back in time a bit and understand that these organizations provided benefits, both tangible and intangible, that our ancestors relied upon. In many cases, these were their only third spaces other than the church. Third spaces being the term in social history that we use for places that are not work and are not home. And for us, our most common third space is probably Starbucks. But for them, it would have been the Fraternal Lodge. It would have been the Society Hall. As I said, it helps us to flesh out the story of their lives.
Right. Right. And to follow up on that, you know, I like how you said that about Starbucks, because that really is like that new space, right? It's like the internet cafe. But well, at the time when you didn't have the internet cafe, you had your local lodge hall of whatever organization it may be, whether it was a Masonic Lodge, Knights Peter Claver, the Elks, Odd Fellows, or what have you. And these organizations, to me, are important for genealogists because you get to learn about the choices and the people your ancestor decided to associate with, which may not have always been necessarily relatives, but to me, friends, associates, neighbors, and even enemies are just as important to fleshing out your ancestor story. And to me, that's one of the reasons why they're important. Also, let's remember to expand a little bit on what Jari said about those benefits. For many of our ancestors, particularly in the Black and Latino communities, fraternal organizations were very important in the early 1900s and backwards, because they offered insurance benefits and other tangible benefits that today we kind of take for granted or have been taken over by other entities in our lives. But there was a time period where if you wanted your medical insurance, well, you had to be a part of, let's say, the local Masonic Lodge, but they don't cover dental. So then you go over to join the Odd Fellows because they cover dental. There were very tangible benefits, and I can't leave out burial benefits. Burial insurance was very, very, very important. And those records exist in many cases, and they're very valuable for genealogists. So trust me, I'll be the first to attest to that.
Well, and then, you know, there is also the fact that you can retrace your family history through their organizational affiliations, right? I mean, just who's in the lodge? All right, it's his cousin, it's so-and-so, it's this so-and-so. And even if you don't have that information on the onset, you can actually find that out, you know, as you do your research or as you go further in your research. So what types of records can you find when it comes to these particular organizations? Or what has the panel come across when it comes to researching organizations?
Well, things like logbooks, minute books, membership rolls, advertisements. Depending on the organization, you can have a really potentially rich output of materials into a community. But then the other question is, how far back are we talking? And then whether those materials were preserved by the organization, or whether the organization actually had the ability to preserve the material. I mean, that's sometimes a question too. Sometimes we're just left with the names.
Right. Also, you will find that many of the organizations do maintain a history. And they have that history in which you will find year after year, they're celebrating that history. And when they celebrate, they're recounting all the events that led up to the formation of that organization. And that also includes the biographical information on the individuals who are the founders. They talk about the reason why these organizations were created, and then they may start laying out some signature programs that came about as a result of those organizations.
Sure. And just to add what you're saying, Bernice, I'm also thinking about organizations that they could be formal and informal. So some of those, like they could be actually involved with providing benefits, or whether they're actually providing, they're more concerned with either a cultural or almost an entertainment or fundraising arm of an organization as well.
Right, because they also, they form because of a reason.
Right, exactly.
And so when you look at an unmet need, Then you look at, well, who were the organizing bodies? And they come up with some kind of preamble. And they come up with a chartering group. And that chartering group, they all go in with a common vision to meet that unmet need in the community. And it's very well documented so that you know whether this organization is sustainable and it then continues to grow and live on.
Yes, certainly. And I think that, especially when you talk about like a national organization or one that's been very successful and widespread, you also get standard operating procedures that you can find a lot of times in these proceedings or in these history books, so that you know, like for AKA, for example, right? I might not need to know, but for example, my great grandmother was a founding member or a charter member of her chapter of AKA. Well, that just from me telling a member that, or from researching history, I can say, okay, these are the people who were in leadership at the time that she did this. This is what the procedures would have been. This is what, you know, and you can really flesh out your ancestor's life in a way that you really would not be able to do with a census record. And I think it's very vital that we realize that these, just like the military, there's a standard operating procedure to how these things go. And while the national components are important, there's a much deeper and more intimate connection with your local history. And if you think that they didn't have that in my town or my little city, you'd be surprised. You'd be really surprised at what your relatives were doing, even if you think you didn't live in a really popular area.
Well, I would also add as well, it will tell you the mindset of the person that you're researching because of the organizations they were affiliated with. Like, you know, especially when it comes to sororities and fraternities, they have, you know, points or targets that they are based on whoever the president is, that's what the organization is gearing itself towards on a yearly basis. And that vacillates and that changes. The other thing we have to consider too is, especially when you get into social organizations such as the National Association for Colored People, NAACP, CORE, SNCC, they all had, you know, at one point it may have been dangerous in that particular area that your ancestor lived in to join those organizations. And so when you see people on the membership rolls that are in your family and you look at the dates that was taking place, that gives you context into how bold that person was. And the fact that they, you know, could take a bold stance like that, just like, you know, registering to vote by participating in that particular organization. That's just something else I think that we should hit on. Jari, do you have anything to add to this? What types of records can you find, or, you know, just period with research organizations?
Sure. Well, as James said, one of the integral things for us to understand is that distinction between groups that are national in scope and groups that are purely local, and to understand the internal structure of those organizations. Oftentimes we'll come across maybe in our family albums these pictures of grandfathers or grandmothers in these elaborate uniforms. And it's helpful to understand that those may indicate that they belong to a uniformed rank, which is usually a higher ranking division of these organizations, or that they carried with these elaborate titles, patron, matron, advocate, all these sorts of things, unique roles and responsibilities for which they were suited. So looking at the constitution of both the national bodies and the local units is definitely important.
And do you have anything to add? Oh, go ahead, Bernice. I'm sorry.
No, I was just echoing, or at least agreeing with what Jari just said. Looking at what's happening at the local regions. I mean, in New Orleans, we have so many social and pleasure clubs. And when you think about those social and pleasure clubs, they all came about for certain reasons, and certain groups of people were a part of those groups. And so it is something for us to take a look at, and that is what's happening on the local level. Why did it happen on the local level? And as I mentioned before, is it sustainable? Is it still going on? And historically, what can we say about those organizations? I also want to just point out, this is a book. This is a book from my sorority, and it was our legacy this is my chapter's book. So you're talking about the national, and then you go to the local, and then you go to what's happening at a chapter. And this is a legacy book that we published that gave an overview of what happened the last 45 years of our group. Well, you have a roster in here. You have events. You have what each of the presidents did. This is information that 20, 30, 40, even 50 years from now, somebody's descendant is going to be looking to find out, well, what did my ancestor do? Well, it's recorded in this book. And so I think this is one of the values of finding out if your ancestors have been a part of a fraternal organization or any type of group activity where you can find that documentation on them.
Yeah, Ellen said to hold up the book again, just so everybody could see what you were talking about, and that's the chapter history.
Beautiful.
For the graduate chapter.
It's a graduate chapter. Yes.
And the book I have is the book that they give you when you join the organization. So it depends on what year you joined is the ending year.
Uh-huh. So if you joined in 99, and that means you're
No, I joined in 2000.
Oh.
So it was the year following, but this is the organizational history, and they've got the different chapters in here, where they are. I mean, all sorts of stuff. The other thing you have to consider too is we have to also, when we're talking about organizations, you got to think about the things that you may find in your ancestors' home that are clues that they were affiliated to an organization, right? Mm-hmm. So if you see this book, you know what I mean? Or if you see, paraphernalia, or, it could be a number of things, pictures. In fact, one of my Genia buddies, there's a picture of her grandmother with her Ivy class. And she's like, what should I do with this photo? I feel bad keeping it because it's part of the history for this. I said, contact the chapter and find out who the person is the historian.
What's the Ivy
give
class
them the
for those
picture.
who don't know?
Okay, so that's the group of people that you came through with when you were initiated into the organization. So it was a photo of her with the folks with her sands, or with her sorority sisters that she came into the organization with. And my friend had multiple copies of this picture, and she said, I want to make sure that it goes back to the chapter. I said, absolutely. I said, they may not have that. That may not be something that they kept. Definitely give that to them. But that was a clue. She knew they were holding Ivy. The letters were on the jackets. Like, she was able to decipher based on what she knew. Right. The fact that they had an organizational affiliation.
Right. Also, you have to think about what all of these organizations will do is create some kind of journal or newsletter or information that's available. It may be stored somewhere, but you have access to that information to just read what was going on at that time. What was going on in the civil rights movement. You're going to find things in there. And so think about this. An organization that's been around for 100+ years. That's 100+ years of data. Absolutely. And resources that you can tap into. And by the way, Nika and everybody else, I will become a 50-year AKA in 2018.
All right.
I'm golden.
She's a gold soror. Each organization has, if a person, at least, and we're talking about National Panhellenic, sororities and fraternities, they have a standard, or once you meet, you've been a member for a certain number of years, an active member, financial member for a certain number of years, then you reach a certain status. So she's going to be a golden soror. She's going to be able to wear the golden soror pin and all the golden soror paraphernalia. So, when her granddaughter sees all this later on and she's, going to become a legacy, or whatever, she has that to fall back on. So, James, you're going to bring up something. Shannon Christmas has a great question as well from the chat room.
Okay. Well, since y'all throwing books up, I wanted to throw this one up because my fraternity, I'm a Prince Hall Mason. I'm a Freemason. We pride ourselves in saying we're the world's oldest and largest fraternity. We're actually celebrating 300 years this coming Saturday as an organization, so that's going to be really exciting. But I wanted to hold this book up. This book is called Masonic Abolitionists, Freemasonry and the Underground Railroad in Illinois. So, to piggyback on what Bernice was saying earlier about learning what was going on in your ancestors' scope in their world, and how did their fraternal organization play into that. I've helped several people who have Illinois ancestry. And when I hear that, particularly when I'm dealing with people of a certain age group, I always go, I wonder if they were a runaway or if they were born free. I say, I wonder if they were members of one of the local lodges. Then I flip it open and go, oh, but we know that lodge was actually a stop on the Underground Railroad. We know that this abolitionist was a member there, or they passed through there, or what have you. Matter of fact, this individual on the cover, if y'all can see, this is past Grand Master John Jones. This is the man whose house that John Brown stayed in before his famous raid. Okay, so if you know that your ancestor was affiliated with someone like John Jones, could it be that they may have known John Brown or someone of that magnitude? Could they may have been in the same organization? Something to look at.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So moving forward, questions wise, what do you all feel are the absolute must-have records when it comes to this type of research? Like, I guess we can just break it down by category. We've got, we talked about sororities and fraternities quite a bit. What about Masonic organizations? Shannon Christmas brings up an interesting question. He says, my maternal third great grandmother, Hester Mims, was an Eastern Star in Barnwell County, South Carolina. What records from the Eastern Star organization would help clarify the lineage of this brick wall ancestor?
No problem. So folks know, in that world, I'm a past master of Corinthian Lodge number 18, and I also serve as the associate grand historian for Washington, D.C. for the Prince Hall Grand Lodge here. Just to give you all that background on me. Number one, proceedings. I can't say that enough in terms of not only just giving you membership rosters, but also death records. A lot of these organizations, death is like a big thing around burial and making sure that they kept accurate, not only in terms of accurate records in terms of finances given to a grieving family, but also making sure they knew when members died. So proceedings, I can't say that enough. And then as well as historical, official histories, as we already kind of talked about. One thing that I think is kind of great about not just because people think Masonry because we kind of have a great amount of name recognition, but you have a ton of other organizations out there as well, such as the one that Jari belongs to, Knights of Peter Claver, the Odd Fellows. A lot of these organizations maybe wrote a history, let's say in 1890 or 1880 something, and a lot of these books are now in public domain. If you start Googling around organizations like the Good Templars, matter of fact, I'm gonna send you 2 links to 2 histories that are free online that have histories not only of national organizations but of local ones, and you can kind of go through those and say, oh wow, I didn't know they had this in my town. Those things are vital, and a lot of these things are free on Google Books and Internet Archive and stuff. But what I have found in the genealogy community, a lot of us, especially in the Black community, aren't looking for them. So since we're not looking for them, we never find them. So, but I'm going to send over, if you're able to post these in the chat, you guys are getting 2 free books tonight. The history of the United Brothers of Friendship and Sisters of the Mysterious 10, as well as the official history of the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows as well. So that's my gift to our loyal BlackProGen fans right there.
Awesome. And Jari, would you like to weigh in before I get another couple questions from the chat room?
Sure. As James said, proceedings or minutes are wonderful sources. You will find that they will pass, the variety of organizations will pass resolutions of condolence to the bereaved families of their deceased members. They will process, if you will, claims if they are beneficial societies, so that those families will receive death benefits. Sometimes there was controversy involving those death benefits as to who was rightfully to be considered a surviving spouse or surviving children or beneficiaries, and those are always usually very, very genealogically rich. Another source, surprisingly, for research that's genealogically significant is court records. I recall a few cases from the 1880s, 1890s here in New Orleans for men who were actually expelled from their societies for failing to turn out in proper uniform for the funerals of their deceased brothers. And you may say to yourself, Well, how did that make it to the courts? Why was that a big issue? Well, you imagine that these working class African American men who had invested, or as they would have said, saved their money for years in these organizations, paid their dues faithfully. You've been in 10, 20, 15 years, what have you, and all of a sudden you're expelled, all of that money is gone, and your family will receive no benefits. So they took issues like that to the courts. And so those records are another big source. I'm sure James can tell you about the wealth of information about Masonic lodges that you can find from groups who considered each other to be clandestine and would go to court about the rights to use the names and titles of lodges.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on that because that's something that I think a lot of folks don't realize. And by the way, I am writing a book on this topic entitled Society Men, so y'all be looking out for that. But a lot of these fraternal organizations that existed before something like Alpha Kappa Alpha, which was a modern leap in terms of fraternal organizations for one main reason. The national Panhellenic organizations that people know and love today attach themselves to the idea of having to go to school and whatnot and being attached to the academic world. Well, there was a time period before that, as we know, where African Americans didn't have that luxury, right? So you had a lot of organizations in the Black community that were started that basically divide into two halves. You have one group, such as the Knights of Peter Claver, let's say, which basically Black people started. That's something that we have to ourselves. Then you have a group such as the Prince Hall Masons, which I belong to, that are African American branches of pre-existing organizations that existed in the white community. And somehow or another, you have an individual like Peter Ogden, for example. When you all read the book on the African American Oddfellows, you'll learn he was a Black man who got permission to start a organization for Black people that was based in some rituals that in an organization that pre-existed. You have a lot of great genealogical records that transpire because the white organizations oftentimes would try to sue the Black organizations out of existence. There was actually a big Supreme Court case, which a lot of people do not know, where the white Shriners tried to sue Black Shriners. If you ever seen those Shriner hospital commercials, they tried to sue us out of existence, and we won that case. Had we lost that case, you might not have a Black fraternal movement to include Black Greek letter organizations, had that case been lost. And that case was used as a foundation for Brown versus Board of Ed. Okay, a lot of people do not know this. Now, here's the question. I can tell you all that all day. What does it mean for you as a genealogist? Well, if you have an ancestor who was a Prince Hall Mason or Eastern Star during that time period, I promise you, 9 times out of 10, they paid money towards the legal defense fund. 9 times out of 10, they paid money towards that legal defense fund, and we have to go back and track these records down. Oftentimes, there are a lot of these lodges, if they still exist, to include mine, have libraries, have archives at local universities that you can actually can go in and track down. So you need to get this information.
Absolutely. All right, we've got quite a few questions from the chat room. Shelly Murphy wants to know, what is the difference between Oddfellows, Masons, Woodmen of the World groups, and also what is the difference between rituals and proceedings?
Well, to answer the question as she asked it, the Oddfellows, Masons, and Woodmen are 3 separate organizations entirely. They all serve similar purposes, and their basic function is similar in terms of offering a place for fellowship, moral and spiritual enlightenment, not necessarily religiously as such. I don't want you to confuse these for being religions, but offering a place for enlightenment, fellowship, as well as having charitable components as well for members as well as the outer world. To answer the question about rituals and proceedings, rituals are the secret initiatory practices that an organization may have. That, like for example, we have 2 AKAs here on this call tonight. Are y'all going to tell us the AKA secret password or whatever? Of course you're not. Same thing with Knights Peter Claver, same thing about myself as a Mason. And as quiet as she's being, my sister True, who's a sister in the Order Eastern Star, she's not going to tell you how Eastern Stars do things. Me and her can have a conversation because we're in a brother-sister organization. But that's the thing, is that those are the secrets that are kept for the membership that make you a member of that. proceedings are the actual records of the meetings, the annual conventions, or what have you, where everybody's turning in their reports of these are the people who died this year. This is the roster of our members this year, and that is really where you're going to get the genealogically relevant information right there.
Well, and I would also add
Absolutely.
too. Sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jari, but I was going to add that legally the organizations have to have a meeting or a convening. It's the same principles between, like the organizations we're part of that are genealogical societies. To keep your incorporation, you have to have your articles of incorporation. It states how many times a year you meet, who your board of directors is, all that kind of stuff. And these organizations have similar setups. And so they had to meet and they had to document it just in case there was some, incidents where somebody, was going to question their validity, because you had to think about it. I mean, if you have an organization that was established during Reconstruction, people could have said, oh, they're trying to overthrow the government, and you know what I mean? They could have said a lot of different things. And if you have minutes, you have a number of different things that you've documented, and you have a national meeting, there's your proof. No, we weren't getting together to overthrow the government. You know what I mean? At least based on our minutes and all that other kind of stuff legally. That's what that is for. Jari, what were you going to say?
Sure. I was just going to add that almost all of these organizations have what we would call sort of esoteric work or degree work that's involved, ritualistic initiation rites and burial rites, and unique ways of opening and closing their meetings, opening and closing their ceremonies that are unique to those organizations and are usually centered around some central myth or central legend or central organizational history or institutional memory that's unique to those organizations. One that I think of just off the top of my head is the Knights of Pythias, which was a hugely popular organization with both a white national body and a colored body, as it were, and they're centered around the old legend, the Greek myth of Demas and Pythias, the two friends who were true to each other even up to the point of death. So all of that esoteric work or degree work is very important. I say degree work because it's something that James and I's organization share in common. For Freemasons, the basic 3 degrees that they take and that they undergo, same thing in the Knights of Peter Claver, same thing in the Knights of Columbus, which are both Catholic organizations. So understanding a bit of that ceremonial side of things is helpful. There are rituals which are the guidebooks to all of that. There are constitutions and bylaws which lay out the rules of the organization and usually provide you with a list of officers at that particular point in time. And then there are the minutes or the proceedings, which are business matters, motions, just like today, Robert's Rules of Order, parliamentary procedure, as to what took place in the meetings.
Awesome. And another question from the chat. Chat's cracking off with questions tonight. How much of this information is available to a non-member of the organizations?
A surprising amount. I can speak in terms of, at least in terms of the Masonic world. People are often surprised when I tell them that we have libraries, not just in terms of we use a library or, we have an external archive, which we do, at least in DC at Howard. We have a lot of times these buildings, these older organizations will have libraries and archives even in their spaces. You'd be surprised at how excited a person like myself, who runs a library like that, will get when you come and say, oh, I'm looking for my grandfather or my grandmother who was a member of this organization. I don't know much, but I have this picture, or I have this document, this is what I have. You'd be surprised at how excited some of these people are, because a lot of times they're just sitting on photos, all kind of books and things that nobody ever asked them about, but they're a wealth of information. I wish that Angela was on tonight, because she's actually came and visited the library that I help run here in DC, and she was amazed at the minute books that we had. And I said, well, Angela, if you like that, wait till you see this other stuff. And she, but if you're not, don't be scared to ask. Now, when you start talking ritual and what are the secrets of this organization, what is it? that's not something that necessarily you're going to get. But when you start saying, well, I want to know what was this piece of regalia that my grandmother's wearing in this picture, and then a person like myself or Jari can look at it and say, well, the only reason that they be wearing that particular item would mean that they served in this position. That means that they had accomplished this task, and that's something that you can utilize and add right to your right to your repertoire.
I would add too, we're talking about this, just in the chat as well. When my father passed away, there was a whole portion of his funeral that we were not at. That there were rites and things that were done there. There were parts that were, for public consumption, but there were other pieces of it that were not. And I know that there's been a question asked about what happens to, I know that when my father passed away, his brothers came and got his stuff, because my brother, at that point wasn't, and my brother is Prince Hall. Just found that out, James. So exactly. So if you might run across my brother, I'll have to make sure you have his information. But when my father died, they came and got his stuff. So me and my mother, we don't have any of it. It all went with them, and it got passed down to whoever it got passed down to. I want to also, there's a lot of questions in the chat room. Let's see. Okay, are these groups close to or linked to any specific universities or faith groups? Meaning, I think the question she's asking is, are the Knights of Pythias associated with the Baptist Church? Or are they associated with the AME Church? Would there be some sort of cross-pollination of people within records that you all have found?
I would say it depends on the organization. Like I said, and I'm going to talk about this in my book. Before the 1900s, most fraternal organizations, or really all of them, none of them were associated with universities before you get into the Phi Sigma Pi, and then you get Alpha Phi Alpha and AKA, and it goes on from there. But many of them were associated with churches. Not all, like Masons, for example. We do not have an official religious requirement, except that we do ask that you have a belief in a deity. Now, with that being said, for whatever reason, and I could get into it, but I won't take up too much time, you do have a disproportionate amount of African Methodist Episcopal members in Prince Hall Masonry and in the Order Eastern Star in general, but that's not a rule of thumb. You can get into organizations that are Catholic based or what have you. So it really just depends on which one that you're talking about. I'm going to leave the Catholic side to Jari, because he, as Angela always says, she always says that Jari's a Catholic me and I'm a Masonic him. So I'm going to let him talk about the Catholic stuff.
Yeah, as James said, most of these groups, by and large, are not tied to any particular denomination. To be an Elk, to be an Odd Fellow, to be in the Knights of Pythias, or even a Freemason, by and large, the biggest requirement is just a belief in some higher power, in a deity. There are some groups that are exclusive to Catholics, for example. The two groups I belong to, I'll mention just one. The Knights of Peter Claver was started in 1909 for Black Catholics. One, because many of them were joining organizations that were considered secret societies and considered banned societies by their church, and also because the predominant Catholic fraternal group then and to this day, the Knights of Columbus, was by and large closed to African Americans. They voted up until the 1960s, actually, on a black ball system almost universally. And as you know, in most places in the South, all it would have taken was for one white member to blackball a black applicant, and that would have been the end of that. The Knights of Peter Claver is unique because I always tell people, wherever I find a council of our organization, and we have over 400, I know that they're usually Louisiana people or Maryland people or old Kentucky families involved, because those are by and large the seats of Black Catholicism. But by and large, the groups are not restricted to any particular denomination. There are groups that are for university graduates, National Association of University Women, all of the Black Greek letter organizations and mainstream Greek letter organizations, for example, would denote that that their fratres and their sorors are college graduates, or at least attended college when they pledged.
And let's see. Okay, I'm trying to get through all these questions because there are a lot of questions. Were there migrations from south to north with some of these groups that you can actually track?
I would say it depends on which ones that you're talking about. For example, we know that Alpha Kappa Alpha was founded at some little school in Washington, D.C. I don't know which one it is, but so every chapter of AKA obviously emanated from the Alpha chapter, which was here at DC at my alma mater, Howard University, right? So I don't personally know what the order was for AKA, but using Masonry, for example, we were started in the Prince Hall Masonry, African American Masonry. We were started in the 1700s in Boston, Massachusetts, and before the Civil War, the organization basically was a northeastern organization. We did have lodges, brothers down in New Orleans, down Jarvis way, but that's kind of like the outlier. You don't get Prince Hall Masons in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina until after the Civil War. Can anybody guess why? Right?
I mean, yeah.
Right, exactly. So that it just kind of depends on which one you're talking about and where it originated. Like Jari, you mentioned about the Black Catholic organizations. If you don't have a high population of Black Catholics, you're not going to look for a Black Catholic organization to start in that particular area. But even though they may have a chapter or what have you there. So it just kind of depends on which one you're talking about. And last thing I will say is this. You do have a lot of organizations like the social and pleasure clubs that we mentioned earlier down in Louisiana that are geographically based, that say, hey, we're a fraternal group and you must be somebody who was born or descended from somebody from this area or from this war or what have you. So that's something to think about also.
Right. Also, you want to think especially when you're thinking about sororities, historically Black colleges and universities. If you have historically Black universities and colleges within your community, that's where you want to look for a sorority or fraternity, because that's where all of them are probably located. Not to mention that you're talking about college educated individuals that are joining these sororities and fraternities. And so you definitely want to keep that in mind and look for your ancestors, especially if they were in that town, if they went to that college, and they should have a history. They may be telling you that they were a part of a sorority or fraternity.
I would also add, before Angela chimes in, because she definitely has some experience with the Mosaic Templars or Templars. Something else too, we talked about legacy earlier when it comes to sororities and fraternities, and that's something that you can see is even still too with college attendance. I know in my family, the first set of kids went to Southern, and then the second half went to Grambling, and you can basically cut it with a knife as to who went where, and then of course based on who was where, depended on who went to which different organizations within the family. So that's also something that you can bring in as well. Angela, would you like to touch on the Mosaic Templars? Unmute yourself.
Hello, am I there?
Yay! Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry to be late. Well, one of the things that I have developed an interest in, particularly because an organization such as Mosaic Templars of America, which was a benevolent society that provided, I think Jari talked about some of the benefits that some of the organizations had, such as burial benefits, death benefits. Mosaic Templars, among others, United Brothers of Friendship, Supreme Royal Circle of Friends of the World, American Woodmen, which is comparable to the Woodmen of the World, but American Woodmen, that's the African American organization. One of the things that I realized is how they really were part of the social fabric of the community, and to a great extent. some of the organizations that were pre-Civil War, pre-emancipation, such as the Knights of Liberty, founded by Father Moses Dixon, one of my heroes out of Missouri. That was a group that was, there we go. I mean, this was a group that was willing to take up arms to end the Civil War, and it was only because of some convincing from some colleagues in Kansas. Well, can you hold off before you do this? Our friend John over here, John Brown over here in Kansas, has something under wraps that's about to unfold, probably in West Virginia, which, as we know, did unfold. But many of these groups, beyond that, these were the precursors to the civil rights movement, and even after the Civil War, these became the organizations that became a foundation for financial support, as well as other kinds of benefits. Hospitals were built by these groups. If you look at the Knights and Daughters of Tabor, if you look, the 12 Knights and Daughters of Tabor, I should say, and of course UBF and some of the others, they really did some things that affected the lives of individuals. Hospitals. One hospital was built as late as the 1940s. So, and I'm thinking of the people in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. Knights and Daughters of Tabor built Taborian Hospital. The what remains of that hospital now, for a while after it closed, when they finally allowed Black patients on the Mississippi Delta to be admitted to hospitals, and we're talking not even, 60 years ago, that hospital closed, Taborian Hospital. But now, of course, it's being used as a rehab facility, so it's still in use for a while. It did go into disrepair. But these organizations had tremendous impact on the community. And if you visit southern states, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, you'll be surprised how many headstones you'll see with MTA on it, and how many, up into the years of the Depression, how many people were able to have headstones for their loved ones because of these groups. And so many of them, UBF, Supreme Royal Circle of Friends of the World, all of these headstones and their lodges and circles or temples or tents, depending on what the group is called, you see what group it was at the bottom of the stone, which gives you a little bit of local history, which I was appreciating listening when I was listening on my phone. Someone, I don't know if it was Jari or James, who talked about the fact that, I know Bernice mentioned it, you know, you've got the macro history, the larger story, but you're getting a small story of the community. Rich information.
I'm going to share, it's a headstone that I know. The only reason why I knew that it was from Mosaic Templars is because, or a group organization like that, is because Angela told me.
Oh yes, I can tell that's an MTA headstone. I can tell that.
Meaning that the organization, of course, you know, they paid burial sort of benefits, right? And they, of course, got them. But this is the type of a headstone that you would be able to find that would let you know that a family member was a part of that organization. I just wanted to go ahead and share that.
I'll talk a little. Oh, it's one of the atlases. It's one of your folks. Okay.
Yes.
I can't see it.
One of the things I can tell you, now someone wanted to know, what does the emblem mean? You see what looks like the circle, the outer circle, inside what looks as if it's something kind of wavy. That's actually a serpent consuming itself. And you see the letters M and A, which stands for, of course, Mosaic Templars of America. In that fourth triangle at the bottom, you see the letter V with the sort of the cubed sign, the 3. And that means, what is it? Veni, Vici, Vidi, I came, I saw, I conquered.
Yes.
Yes, I came, I saw, I conquered. And of course, you see the name of the deceased person. And now that stone actually is lying flat. It should be standing upright.
Yes.
So,
yes.
You know, someone, you know, if they know someone who can, you know, put it back upright. There is a base. It's probably sunk into the ground, but it really stands upright. described. And these throughout the South, particularly the states that are close to Arkansas. But I was surprised to see how many I saw at a cemetery in Birmingham, Alabama, when I went on a cemetery run with someone when I was at Sanford one year. And I mean, full of MTA headstones, which tells me that chapter was very active.
To go back to what we were saying earlier about resources for something like the Mosaic Templars, which was a very, very powerful group, particularly in that part of the country, they have an official history book that does exist. So we need to find out what was going on in that particular area, so we can find out where was this person, who were they involved with, what was going on at that time period. These are the type of things that are existing. But if we're just taking a picture of a headstone and putting it on Find a Grave and moving on, we're missing a piece of that ancestor's life that we might be able to uncover.
Clearly are missing a piece of their life. And I can support what James was saying. I was in a meeting where James presented about a month and a half ago, and someone said exactly the situation that he described. Gee, my grandfather, great-grandfather died, and we found all this stuff, sashes and aprons and symbols and what have you. And so I think James said, oh, what was your ancestor's name? Well, he lived in Washington. His name was so-and-so. And the gentleman, was that Mr. Jehudi who was with you that day? He pulls out this book and says, okay, Solomon Jones, page 70. And he opens the book and literally starts reading this man's history. And that was, I think it was Alice Harris, at the Central Maryland chapter, and she was just stunned at all of this rich information about her ancestor.
All right, and let's see. I'm trying to get to any other questions we might have. There were a lot being thrown out by the folks in the chat room. Is there anything else you all can think of before we wrap up and get to viewer comments and ask Mariah?
One thing that I will say is that a lot of these organizations, you do have historians and scholars who are working on these things, whether they're members or not. But a lot of these organizations, especially your more local ones, you may be the one person or maybe one of 2 or 3 people who's researching at that moment. Don't be scared to break new ground and to and even get your stuff published, because you don't know who's the next person you may be helping. One thing that I will throw out there real quickly, if you are in or have ancestors in Georgia, back during the Great Depression, the Grand Master for the Prince Hall Masons of Georgia, John Wesley Dobbs, he restructured their financial system for their benefits packages. They took they called in their old insurance records and reissued new policies. Well, when I found this out, I called my friend who's the grand historian of the Masons down there and said, what did y'all do with those old records? He said, oh, they're upstairs and we don't have them indexed. We don't have them organized in a way, but I've been trying to get some help to do it, but I need help. So a lot of these organizations may actually be able to use volunteers. I know I could use one in my library. So don't be scared to even step up and volunteer sometimes, because you never know what you will find. Texas is another one that has, they actually had fraternal death certificates that are not on Ancestry.com, aren't on Family Search. These are the type of records that you should be looking out for that can spark a whole nother interest in an ancestor that you thought you knew everything about.
Something else that we're going to bring up, and definitely when you're talking about social organizations, is a book called Our Kind of People. That is kind of like a good primer on these organizations and other ones in addition to what we're talking about, like Jack and Jill, Boulay, the Links, several, very highfalutin organizations that people are members of. This book came out in 1999. It's written by Lawrence Otis Graham. I'll put the link in the chat room for everyone who's interested in it, but it definitely gives you a bird's eye view into why these organizations are so important when it comes to researching or really just learning about the history of African Americans' upper mobility. Jari, is there something you'd like to add before we get to viewer comments?
I was just going to mention that James and I organized a Facebook group called African American Fraternal History that has really taken off lately. And if you have any of those unusual societies or any exciting discoveries, feel free to post them there and to follow that page.
All right. All right. And we've got some more information. If you have, there's a lot of questions in the chat room. So I'm going to request that James and Jari head over ASAP so that they can feel free to answer specific questions that folks have over there, including, you know, what do you do when a post is closed and you've contacted the state historian with no response, as well as state and district commanders for an American Legion post, several things like that. If you're in the chat room, we'll go ahead and put the link to the Facebook group that James and Jari that they admin, which is great. Anything else before we get to viewer questions?
I want to say shout out to the 5 people who just applied to the group.
Well, it works. This works. If you don't think that it works, it does. It totally does. All right, so let's move forward. Let's get to some of our viewer comments for the evening. We've got Melissa Barker, the archive lady. In our archives, I have letters from members of the Masonic Lodge where they were getting together support for a fellow member's wife after his death, which is great stuff. That's awesome. Regina Calloway mentions, my maternal grandfather, Claude Waters Jr., was a 25-year Mason with membership to Monarch Lodge number 73, Monique Temple number 36, and Victoria Consistory. Also president of the Scimitar Club for 2 years. Okay, sorry, I said that wrong. I see so many fraternal order insignias upon headstones in New Orleans. Absolutely. Elmira Lofton.
Can I shout them brothers out in that lodge and that chat and that temple, because they actually have invited me out to speak there later in the year. So that was
okay.
They're okay in my book.
They're okay in James's book. I'm glad they got the approval. Elmira Lofton mentions, I recently read on my grandmother's obituary from 1989 that she was a member of some secret society. I've never heard the name, and now I want to research it, which is great. We gave her some, I guess, a nudging, which is wonderful. So there are a lot of questions, a lot of things that people still want to hear about, talk about. If you have questions and we weren't able to get to that, feel free to go into the chat room. Our 2, panelists of knowledge for the evening are there to answer your questions. Also, don't forget you can tweet us as well to get answers to your question. But now it's time for your favorite part of the show, where you can send us questions and we can, quote unquote, do your genealogy. It's time for Ask Mariah. Your questions, conundrums, your I can't stand this, it's bothering me, somebody please help me, throw me a life preserver here. This is where you, the viewer, can submit your questions to us or your queries to us and watch the panel work it out live. FYI, I always have to mention that no one has seen this question before we throw it out before this evening. No one knows what's coming up. So, this is straight up live, straight up impromptu when we get these questions. So tonight's question has to do with DNA. And FYI, panelists are the person who submitted the question is in the chat room. All right, so tonight's Ask Mariah comes from Trisha Blount. Her question is, I need help interpreting the DNA results. Looking at both trees and talking to Jariet, there is no obvious common ancestor. Jariet being this is a person that she's related to. Looking at the matches in Marion County, they all connect to Friday Woodbury, who was born in 1790. But I cannot connect my mother to Jariet, and it's a very strong connection. My thoughts and questions are, is there a non-parental event, or is there a connection to Henrietta? So let me go through the question again. So she's talking about Jariet, which is a DNA match. Right? She's looking at both trees and there's no obvious common ancestor. And she says, looking at the matches in Marion County, they all connect to Friday Woodbury, who was born about 1790. But she cannot connect her mother to Jariet, who is the DNA match. And it's a very strong connection. Her thoughts and questions are, is there a non-parental or non-paternal event, or is there a connection to Henrietta? So let me move forward to what she knows so far. All right. So what she knows so far is my mother, Jeran Kemp, is the oldest of 9 born in Richmond, Virginia. Both her parents were raised by distant relatives. Her mother is Louisa Gray, born in Trenton, New Jersey, to Joe Gray, born 1879, and Bertha Hicks, born 1902. They were married in Trenton, 1919, and 2 children on record, Dorothy, born 1919, Louise, born 1923. My mother said she had a younger brother, Eddie, died around 1972 at 42 years of age. He was in the Army. Her mother and family lived in Trenton until 1925, and then that's when they moved to Mount Vernon, New York. So I'll go ahead and read this again. And Trisha just added in that Jerry is her mother's second cousin. That's how she shows up in the DNA results. So her mother, Jaren Kemp, is the oldest of 9, born in Richmond, Virginia. Both of her parents were raised by distant relatives. Her mother is Louisa Gray, born Trenton, New Jersey, to Joe Gray, born by 1879, and Bertha Hicks, born 1902. They were married in Trenton, 1919, and 2 children on record are Dorothy, born 1919, and Louise, born 1923. Her mother says that she had a younger brother, Eddie, who died around 1972 at 42 years of age. He was in the Army. Her mother and family lived in Trenton, New Jersey until 1925, and then they moved to Mount Vernon, New York. I'm not done. There's still 2 more slides worth of information. All right, moving forward, both of Louise's parents, Joe and Bertha, died of tuberculosis. Joe in 1930 at Grassland Hospital. His death certificate and marriage certificate state his father is James Gray. The death certificate and 1930 census state he is from Virginia. His marriage certificate states his mother is Henrietta Sophia. After Joe's death, Bertha, with 2 children, went back home to Powhatan County, Virginia, and died in 1931. Louise and Dorothy were raised by Bertha's first cousin. As far as her mother's DNA, it confirms the Hicks relationship in Powhatan, Virginia. It also shows a strong tie to the Bahamas, more than likely through the Kemp per second, third cousin tree. The biggest surprise is 40 plus matches from Marion County, South Carolina, with the surname Robinson, Woodbury, Davis, Rao, and Leggett, and the closest match is the second cousin, Jerry Robinson, who she referred to earlier. The family doesn't match anyone on my tree. The only coincidence is that Jerriet's family was in Trenton, New Jersey in the 1920-1930s. Jerriet had 2 uncles living on the same street, Jefferson Street, in 1920. Jerriet's grandfather, Theodore Robinson, born 1924, is around the same age as Louise. Other coincidences are that Louise has a cousin named Martha Robinson living in Richmond, and that is all we know. Hold on, one more slide. In terms of genealogy she's done. Now you see Trisha said, y'all are not gonna come for me asking me if I didn't find records. She just went and pulled everybody's edges back on here. So she said she's got a 1920 census, 1930 census, marriage certificate, World War I draft card, death certificate, city directories, and she's looking to locate marriage records, but she has not found them. So this is where she's at. The first thing that pops into Nika's mind right now is that there is an NPE, and you need to just go ahead and recognize that whoever the daddy was supposed to be is not the daddy.
Yeah, that's kind of where I feel about it. I think somebody.
There are too many circumstantial clues. When you threw out the Jerry being the second cousin, meaning she shares one, or more great grandparents. The other piece you have to remember is that Jerry is older than you, Trisha, or she can be older than your mother, which means it could be a first cousin once removed. The DNA systems don't show relationships as once removed or twice removed. They just say second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, whatever it is. My hypothesis is that, like I said, this is a non-paternal event, meaning that Joe is probably not the father, and that it is one of the Robinson men who was living near your ancestors. The fact that they were on the same street, on the same census, or that Jerry had 2 uncles that were there, that would make sense. That would also mean that, if Jerry's a second cousin, she could be a first cousin once removed. If her uncles were there, that would mean that potentially one of the uncles is the father, not who you think it is.
Yeah, the question would be: is there a way that is there a way that the Y chromosomes can be tested on your side as well as on this other person's side, because then once you get that result back, it gets even more definitive in my mind. But yeah, it's too much circumstantial evidence for it to be anything else in my mind. I want it to be, but I gotta agree with Nico on that one.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I was just curious, was Friday a female or a male?
Ellen wants to know if Friday, who was born about 1790, if that was a female or a male. It's a great question. Something else that sticks out to me. So James mentioned getting the Y-DNA tested. That means getting it sequenced through a company like Family Tree DNA to see if a direct male descendant on this particular line matches a direct male descendant on the Robinson line of Jerriet's family. To me, I just want to commend her for the fact that she has done somewhat of an exhaustive search using genealogy in addition to this DNA research, because oftentimes folks don't marry the two. They think that they operate exclusively, and you actually have to start looking for patterns like this. So that I think she deserves a round of applause for that, and for being thorough and sending so much information over. Anything else anybody want to chime in with? I definitely think that this is a non-paternal event, because to me, when you're doing DNA research, you're looking for patterns, you're looking for pileups, you're looking for repetition in surnames and locations. And based on what you found, you found a strong tie to the Bahamas. You found, more than likely through a Kemp, per second or third cousin tree. Biggest surprise is 40 plus matches from Marion, South Carolina with the surname Robinson. Woodbury, Davis, Rao. There, it's to me, it's right there. We got a Paul, not Paul situation. I think we can stick a fork in that. The other question is,
she could do a comparison, couldn't she? Where she could see which one of her family members are matching closest, or who has the most segments.
Yes,
to give her more of a hint.
Yeah, I think too, testing, maybe testing if your mother's got siblings or first cousins or someone else who, where you can verify that they are a descendant of the couple that was supposed to be the ancestors on this particular line, just as a litmus test to see if it may be just your mom, or just her immediate family that was affected by this. Also, triangulation is key here, making sure that people are matching in the same areas. But with such a high match with Jerriet showing up as a second cousin, I mean, that's really kind of like Paul, not Paul. That's kind of like Paul. And just, there's the number of matches is kind of what's throwing me off. She's asking who she can test on her side. I would say, since this is, this is your mother's, these are your mother's grandparents. And the other thing that sticks out too is that Joe Gray was significantly older than Bertha.
Right.
And so I'm not saying that he lost his little bit of hip hop he had by the time he had those kids, but she was a young woman and he was older. So that's what kind of sticks out to me.
I'm trying to be a more mature person than I have been on previous episodes, but I got so many I could say.
You're doing really good.
I'm trying.
You're doing really, really good. You're doing really good.
I'm holding it in. I'm trying to know I'm holding it in, y'all. I'm holding it in.
She mentioned, she said her mother's aunt just passed away. So if any of your aunts or uncles have children, those would be great people to test. Maybe choose a couple, because there's a possibility that multiple children were descendants of this Robinson family, not just your mom. Also, you want to be able to compare those additional cousins together and see if they match at a higher amount than they do with your mother. And then that would, of course, then indicate that they may or may not be tied to the Robinsons as well. Anything else anybody want to throw in on this? Since we pretty much have decided that it's probably an NPE.
There might be somebody that might know. Somebody might still know some part of the story, but it's worth talking to elders.
I would search newspapers on this. Maybe because I'm really into this right now. There's a lot that was in the paper. See if you can find information about that Robinson family, and maybe there was, you know, I don't know. I mean, it could be, I'm over here fantasizing. Maybe he saved her from something, or, you know, I don't know.
Maybe they were in a fraternal group together.
Maybe they were, come on now, or they went to the same church. Yes. All right, panel.
Yeah.
I agree. I think these are all good leads. And you know what? And the other thing is too, sometimes when it comes to DNA and just with genealogy, I always tell people sometimes you just have to put it down for a while and come back to it later. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, there's a huge windfall. And you know, so keep it in your tickler file. But I think you should definitely start considering, and the fact that the cousin's name is Jarriet and your mother's name is Jaran.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Bernice said in our comments over here. Triangulation.
Right. But you know, I'm more also into the emotional side of it. So if you have someone and it's a non-parental event, think of how you're going to share that information. Think of how the person may feel. And always, you know, realize that you are dealing with people who may be surprised. And so you want to take that element of surprise and be gently informative about what you're finding out without calling out anyone and embarrassing anybody. So always think about that when you do DNA. You know, you do expect the unexpected. And so examine how you want to go forward with presenting that information to your family.
Well, and the other thing is, adding on to that too, is realizing your audience. If you know somebody who's affected by this is sort of an emotionally fragile person, you know what I mean? You got to take that into account. And, you know, there are some folks who they're just, it doesn't matter, like nothing's going to shake them. You know what I mean? Or they may grieve or have emotions about it privately. So that's definitely something to consider when it comes to breaking this news to everybody. And as Ellen mentioned, there may be someone in the family that has known this and they just haven't felt empowered to come out and say something. And this, maybe bridging this conversation or bringing the conversation forth may actually allow them to come out and say, well, you know, my mama did say that, whatever it is. So if we don't have any other feedback, we'll go ahead and move forward to our current events and everything else. If you are interested in sending us a question, query, conundrum, whatever it is, genealogy related when it comes to family history research and whatever problems that you're having, there's always a link in every single description of our videos of BlackProGen Live on each episode to submit to Ask Mariah, and hopefully you will be selected for the next episode. We want to thank Trisha Blount for sending us your family history conundrum. And we hope that you will share with us your progress going forward. All right, so moving forward for current events, just want to touch on a couple things before we get out of here. Google just released an interactive map of lynchings in the United States. This is something that just came out. And this is done in conjunction with the Equal Justice Initiative. And if you have not seen this, oh my gosh, please do not pass go. Don't collect $200. Head straight over there. It is absolutely amazing. This what's been done. Basically, the Equal Justice Initiative, if you've never heard of it, it's an organization that basically is trying to really stop the for-profit prison system, and it does a lot of research on that whole arena, and also trying to preserve the history of lynching in the United States. And according to a report led by the Equal Justice Initiative, they're based out of Montgomery, Alabama. More than 4,000 Black Americans were lynched across 20 states between 1877 and 1950. And they have a publication that you can actually request. It's a book that talks about how they went into all of the research for this particular project. And so what this website does is it brings to light that research. One of the most powerful things that's a part of this website is a video where a family from Oakland, California goes to visit the site that their ancestor was lynched in, and family members have not returned to that location since the lynching took place. And I can guarantee you, you'll be hard pressed not to shed a tear watching it. It is very, 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 very powerful. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. Definitely something to look into, and kudos to Google for stepping up for this particular project and providing the space and the technology in order to host it. The second thing is about a University of Tennessee lecturer or professor who was fired after a student alleged racism and retaliation. And this story actually came out I would say a couple weeks ago. We didn't know the organization or the university because the student didn't mention that, but it had something to do with a question that was asked on an exam. And the question was, it was a class about family structures. And the question that was asked was, historical research on African-American families during slavery shows that A, family ties weren't important in African cultures where the slaves' ancestors originated. Consequently, family bonds were not strong among slaves. B, two-parent families were extremely rare during the slave period. C, Black family bonds were destroyed by the abuses of slave owners who regularly sold off family members to other slaveholders. D, most slave families were headed by two parents. So based on that question, how would the panel answer?
Why are we doing this with a multiple choice question?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I would ask. I would want to ask. What did this professor's ancestors do that lets them know all this information? That's what I want to know. I want to know, like, do you have like a record of your ancestor slaves that so you know the answer? Because like this is too. The paradigm is just just crazy. Yeah, it's just dismissive. Yeah.
It is very dismissive. If you were taking this class, how would you answer this question? Which
one is this class?
This is oops, oh gosh, I'm skipping around. Let me go back. This is I know it's a family structures class. It's in a sociology. It's in the sociology department. So that's the lens that this is coming from. Now, based on what the professor, the student answered C, but the professor said the correct answer was B.
What?
Yes. The professor said that B, two-parent families were extremely rare during the slave period, was the correct answer. And the student argued that it was C, Black family bonds were destroyed by the abuses of slaveholders who regularly sold off family members to other slaveholders. And she proceeded to debate the professor about the answer to this question. And in the course of her doing so, the professor came after her on social media and in the class, and eventually was dismissed and fired because she just could not let this go.
Oh, that's crazy.
Which is absolutely crazy.
Crazy.
I mean,
it's cray.
If you got an issue, here's a tissue.
Yeah, that was a bait question there.
It was,
Yeah.
and the professor belittled the student on social media. Completely belittled her for the fact that she challenged her and all kinds of stuff. And I just have to say kudos to this young lady for being, I won't even say strong enough, but just in a place in her life where she felt confident enough to. Because think about this. This happened at the University of Tennessee. This is not Podunk College. This is UT. Right. I live in Tennessee. UT is an institution. It's like church here. You got UT, Ole Miss, and then Alabama falls over here. Yes, the UT Vols. This is a huge deal for this child or this young lady, I'm sorry, to have done this. There's a whole Medium post that she wrote that actually details the play-by-play of actually what happened. That actually is what I read. The fact that this made national news, I didn't learn about this until a couple days ago. That I was shocked that it actually made national news because I read and shared what she had written. But I think Shelley brings up an important point in in the chat room that students should be able to question and challenge a professor.
Exactly.
Especially, you know, I mean, let's advocate to the younger folks who are, you know, or people who are in college right now who are, you know, into family history research, and you know what you're reading and you know what you're seeing, you know what the oral history tells you, and then you're taking a class like this and the professor is telling you that what you're reading and what you're seeing is not right.
Yeah, but that goes back to what I'm saying. It's like, you know, I mean, when you start talking about this stuff, this is not some esoteric conversation. This is, you're talking about people who maybe in the class who know 6 or 7 or 8 generations back, who maybe they've been watching BlackProGen now, and they've dug in their family history, and they say, wait a second, that's not what happened in my family. Right. So when you have an institution that's trying to tell you your history, right? Don't question yourself. You got to start questioning that institution, because you have to ask the question, who's qualified to really talk about this topic? Is it really the professor, or is it Big Mama? I'm just asking, you know, I'm just asking.
It's a great question. It's a great question. All right. Well, those are our 2 current events for the evening. And we definitely want to let you know about what's coming up when it comes to BlackProGen Live. If you hadn't noticed, it's June. And in the summertime, we kick up a number of episodes. So we'll be doing 3 episodes a month for the month of June, July, and August. Our next episode is Help Me Get to My Folks. Are you tired of having to sift through tons of records just to get to the folks you know are yours? Join us as we talk our inside tips and tricks on narrowing down people of color in online record sets. So don't forget to join us next Tuesday, June 27th, same bad time, same bad channel, for Help Me Get to My Folks. Easy ways to find people of color in online records. And I just love this picture of this old man with this with this pipe. I just love it. Love the whole thing. Love the whole thing. Also, don't forget to set reminders for 2017's remaining episodes of BlackProGen Live. Coming up, we've got people of color in the Northeast, which would be Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, live from the 2017 Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, aka Maggie. We also have people of color in the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio, and also privacy and genealogy and DNA. You can visit my YouTube channel and click set reminder in the upcoming live stream section of the page. So then that way you don't forget when the episode is going to air that interests you. Also, don't forget about the other stuff that we have going on in our genealogy sphere and world. Our panelists, Bernice Alexander Bennett, has research at the National Archives and beyond, and that always takes place on Thursdays. This Thursday, June 22nd, she has My Free People of Color and Those Classified as Melungian with Gigi Best Richardson. You just have to say her name like that, Gigi Best Richardson. We also have the African Roots podcast that comes out the 2nd and 4th Friday of the month. Next podcast will be released this Friday, June 23rd, with the lovely and beautiful Angela Walton Raji and her soothing podcast voice. Also, our buddy Genia Bud, Dear Myrtle, has Mondays with Myrt, as well as Wacky Wednesday. We have a couple of the folks that normally join us. Dustin, who was in our chat room tonight, and I believe Melissa also was in the chat room tonight. So don't forget to join Dear Myrtle for her YouTube live segments that she has every week on Mondays and Wednesdays. Also, a quick reminder, don't forget to subscribe to The Lowdown. Get the latest and greatest from BlackProGen in your inbox. Subscribe to The Lowdown today. Check the description of the recording of this and any BlackProGen live episode for the link to subscribe. Don't forget to join the conversation. Do you have some feedback for us on this episode? Did we forget something? Do you have a question? Do you just want to say thanks, you guys? You're doing a really good job. Don't forget to tweet us at BlackProGen and hashtag your comments BlackProGen. Something that was interesting being at the Genealogy Jamboree last week is that I noticed there were people who came up to me who told me they watched the show.
Right.
So sometimes we think we're just firing a shot in the dark, like,
yeah.
You know, or did a tree, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there, does it make a sound? You know, we wonder if that happens, but I got confirmation that people are watching and they're getting a lot from the show. So we want to thank our viewers. All eyes on me. Thank you so much for watching us and participating with our crazy banner and all of our stuff. So any closing thoughts before I run out of here and make sure that my DVR does not catch up to Queen Sugar live, so I can fast forward through the commercials, because yes, that is my show and it's a 2-night premiere. Yes, Ralph Angel. Yes, if you're not watching Queen Sugar, you need to, just like you need to be watching Underground, because there is genealogy woven in, up, and through Queen Sugar, especially if you have Louisiana roots. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, those borderlines.
I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you so much to Jari for coming on tonight. He definitely livened us up this evening. I do want to make sure that I just say 2 things I forgot to mention. One, when you research a lot of these fraternal organizations, a lot of them will end up having external archives at your local Black colleges, like a Tulane University or Howard or what have you. So don't be afraid to use that resource. And also, for those people who are members of OGS and these genealogy societies, think of those memberships also too in the same way that what we talked about earlier. A lot of times we document so many of our other ancestors and relatives, we forget that someday somebody's going to want to document us. So make sure you keep that stuff in order and attach it to your tree. Other than that, I will see you guys later.
All right, that's a great admonishment, especially if you are the historian of your genealogical society and you have been falling behind on your job.
Mm-hmm. Well,
just want to put that out there. Or if you're a part of another organization and you notice that there is not a historian, perhaps maybe you need to step in that role, because you already kind of understand the need and just really the need to maintain an organizational history that's accurate. And the same goes for your church or anything that you're involved in that where a history is needed and wanted. So on behalf of everyone here, I'm Nika Smith in Tennessee. Angela Walton Raji is in Maryland. So is Bernice Bennett. We've got Evelyn Fernandez Sacco in Florida. Jari is in the boot. He's in New Orleans, baby. Along with James, who is in Virginia now.
No, Maryland.
Oh, sorry, Maryland. I'm forgetting. By way of Jersey. And True Lewis, who is in Kentucky. We will see you next Tuesday, June 27th for Help Me Get to My Folks. Easy ways to find your people.
Ain't no such thing as halfway genealogist. I'm sorry. I had to get
yes, I know. We got to give a rest to Prodigy from Mob Deep, who succumbed to sickle cell related complications tonight. If anybody, they're, I guess you would say the millennials or the younger people who are part of BlackProGen Live, most of us know who Mob Deep was. They were a seminal rap group in the 90s and the 2000s, and the one of the folks in the group died tonight as a result, or earlier today as a result of complications from sickle cell. And they just performed in Vegas on Sunday, so you'll see a lot of young people talking about Mob Deep. In fact, what's interesting is their first album came out more than 20 years ago, and the NBA still uses Shook Ones and some of their tracks during montages during games, so they're still getting a check,
Yes,
but
they are.
Yes, they are. So anywho, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Tuesday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Have a good evening, you all.